Well, hello out there to all of you seekers of literary escapism. Welcome to my channel where I sit amongst my dolls for absolutely no apparent reason whatsoever and talk about the books I like. Because the world is scary, so I like to escape into fiction, then sit amongst fake plastic people and talk to myself about it. My name is Daniel and I am the Barbie Book Boy. Today, I want to talk about Hollow by Celina Myers. A paranormal fantasy novel that blends vampires, psychic abilities, and family rivalry, and the total bummer of realizing that your childhood specialness might already be behind you. So let's get into it. Mia Adair is in her early 20s, and like everyone at that age, she has everything all figured out and she is deep into a fail-safe life plan. Or she's flailing, like not doing much of anything. And it's much to do with her bizarre childhood, where she experienced a slight taste of roundabout fame by being featured in a paranormal book that her own mother wrote. Due to Mia being a kid who could talk to the dead. But as she grew up, her paranormal gift seemed to just kind of disappear. Now, she's just a former curiosity with a normal life and an uncomfortable sense that she peaked too early. And she goes on to become a regular working stiff, just like the rest of us. She's worked exactly 2 jobs, an independent bookstore that she loved but eventually closed, and a big chain bookstore with no soul where we now find her. But aside from her job at a bookstore, she hasn't really thought too much ahead for life. I mean, she's not exactly the picture of a thriving, energetic, ambitious young person. That is, until she dies, which was a total freak car accident during one stormy drive home from work. So imagine her surprise when she wakes up from this car accident in a casket. Mia has become a full-on vampire. And now she's at the mercy of the family, which is actually 2 rival vampire families that split apart and are each now campaigning for Mia to join them. They each want her as their newest family member. And color me jealous, because I've never had so much as a single vampire show me any interest, let alone 2 entire vampire families. Why don't you want me? But you know, it's actually not as awesome as it sounds, because Mia is forced to abandon her old life for this new vampire adventure. And the clock is ticking, because she only has like 24 hours to decide which one of these vampire families that she wants to join. So as Mia gets a crash course in their family history, she also learns about their various powers and dynamics and family traditions. And at the same time, her old supernatural childhood gifts seem to be returning now that she's way dead. And those gifts could potentially help her make the decision for which family she ultimately wants to join. And as if that weren't complicated enough, she also finds herself drawn romantically to 2 very different figures from each family. So the book is doing several very many things at once. It's a vampire origin story. It's a story about identity and lost potential. It's a family drama between immortal clans with centuries of resentment. And it's also a romance that's built on loyalty and attraction in the midst of all of this supernatural chaos. And even though Mia was dissatisfied with her pre-vampire life, becoming undead isn't as glamorous as one might think. In fact, it's deeply disruptive. But you know, she doesn't really have time for processing all of that. There's this sense that Mia is stepping into a drama that existed long before her, and it's going to exist long after. And that gives the book texture, which makes the stakes feel higher than just some personal romance. However, with all of that family history, the book introduces a lot of characters mighty quickly. Once Mia enters the vampire world, she is immediately surrounded by all of the members of both of these large families. And each of these members has their own history and baggage and alliances. And for my simple brain, the speedy introduction of all these characters was a bit overwhelming. Names, relationships, and past grievances arrive in rapid succession. Sometimes before I had any time to anchor them in context, but ultimately only a select few of them end up being relevant to the overall conflict. So the other characters just kind of blur together because they're presented as a large supernatural ensemble rather than as distinct individuals with their own narrative space. I was trying to learn vampire rules and understand these clan rivalries and track romantic tensions all at once. And the cognitive load became a little heavy for me, at least for my admittedly limited capacity. But it doesn't mean the characters were weak. It just means that the structure was a bit crowded. The story might have benefited from a slower rollout of the supporting cast, because that way each relationship would have felt more defined before the next one began. Just saying, as someone who's never written a book. But the good news is that once the narrative settles onto Mia and her journey and her powers, the book does become more focused. Her struggle between the two families and the two possible futures sort of becomes the spine of this story. The psychic element adds a sense of urgency, and the romance gains emotional stakes. And it's at that point that the book starts to feel more confident and cohesive. Which brings me to my second, only slight criticism. The second half of the book, including the ending, feels kind of rushed. Where the early section of this book took its time building this vampire history that I actually really enjoyed and kind of wish could be its own book, everything accelerated when I got to Mia and her transformation. The revelations were coming quickly. Emotional turning points happened really close together. Events that seemed like they deserved an extended exploration instead arrived and resolved in rapid sequence, which created a bit of a pacing imbalance. The book spends a long time preparing for the stage, and then it seems eager to just lower the curtain. The consequences of major discoveries don't always get the room to breathe. And Mia's psychic power, which is built up as extremely significant, moves from mystery to resolution at a breakneck speed. But even still, the ending itself wasn't unsatisfying in concept. It fit thematically, but it just felt a little compressed. I was happily invested in the slower development of the vampire world at the beginning of the book, but then the final stretch didn't seem to linger long enough to kind of tie it all together. I wanted it to be more savory, to linger on my palate just a little bit longer. Because the book sets up so many relationships and rivalries, and so many of those threads end up feeling more summarized than dramatized. It just needed more pages, that's all I'm saying. But despite my nitpicking little insignificant criticisms, Hollow succeeds in what it's trying to be. A supernatural coming-of-age story about trying to reclaim your purpose. The romance and clan politics add tension, sure, but the heart of the book is Mia's own rediscovery of her supernatural gifts and purpose. Ultimately, Hollow is ambitious. It wants to be a romance, a fantasy, a family saga, and a story about personal reinvention. And that ambition sometimes created structural problems, especially with the character overload and rushed resolution, but it also gives the book range. It gives it lots of places to go, especially if we anticipate prequels and sequels, which, based off of the epilogue, I totally do. At least I hope so. So if you enjoy paranormal fiction with vampires and psychic abilities and morally complicated family systems, Hollow is worth reading. Just be prepared for a nicely paced beginning, followed by a conclusion that arrives much faster than you might have hoped or expected. In the end, this is a story about what happens when a life that feels finished suddenly finishes and then begins anew, with fangs. And that's Hollow by Celina Myers. A book that reaches for a lot, stumbles a little, but still manages to carve out an engaging supernatural story about identity, love, and choosing where you belong. Thank you so much for watching. I'm going to be doing these little book review videos weekly, so if this is your thing, then stay tuned. Oh, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Leave a comment telling me all about your own vampire family drama. Or maybe if you had any like supernatural childhood abilities that eventually faded and left you feeling inadequate and vulnerable to vampires. Until next time, try not to become a pawn in any vampire family rivalries. Bye!